All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's the Friday free-for-all. I always open by saying this. I'll say it again. I hope you'll join me, especially on the free-for-all. May get a call from Maury. Not certain about that. He did suggest he would try to reach us today, and I've got the video line open for him, as well as the phone lines open for him and everyone else. Phone number there, 240-242-5646. Hope you'll join me to talk about really the issues of the day, the issues of the week. The free-for-all, we kind of go back over topics that we have been touching upon, if not the actual stories, and at least the broader subject. So I haven't really stopped talking about Israel's genocidal actions in Gaza since October 7, October 8th, and obviously the catalyst, the latest trigger for the activities by the Israeli Defense Force in Gaza was the terrorist action by Hamas. Certainly, we decry it. It was terrible. It was wrong, and they are still holding hostages. But they're not equivalent. They're not morally equivalent. What Israel is doing now cannot be explained, justified, or excused by what Hamas did on October 7th. And I feel that it's reprehensible when people try to do that, or it's certainly, if not reprehensible, truly ignorant of them, and hoping that by providing the evidence, elucidating just how horrific what Israel is doing to Gaza is for civilians, for innocent people, and how it is not resulting in any improvement in the situation for the hostages. In fact, it's only endangering them. My hope is maybe to change some minds. I mean, that's really the goal here. Didn't have much luck changing someone's mind yesterday. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But right now, what's going on in Gaza? And the New York Times I'm very critical of the New York Times a lot, right? The old gray lady, that's what they call it, the gray lady, whatever. I'm very critical of it because I feel as though they so often do betray the progressive movement, which they claim, I think, pretty clearly to be part of. They so often talk about issues that are so important to them, often woke issues, condemning Trump at every opportunity, claiming to be champions of the free press. They have their Remember the Neediest campaign. I don't know if they still do that, where they're trying to collect money for New Yorkers who are suffering. And they do some really good work. This story here is very critical. Back from Gaza hospitals. This is in today's online paper, featured one of their stories from just the past few hours. I don't have the date on there, but it is March 22nd. Back from Gaza hospitals, doctors tell Washington of horrors amid ceasefire push. So let's hear from the doctor because I think we really need to know. And this is firsthand. This is not in any way hearsay. It's not reported to. This is a witness to the horrors of Gaza and the atrocity that Israel is inflicting on Gazans. So here's Nick Maynard.
She would die in agony. Some days we didn't have any.
Get that back a little bit there. We're having a little bit of a problem there. Didn't start it in the right spot. I think it was playing beforehand. So here we go. Let's do it again.
I spent 2 weeks at Al-Aqsa Hospital, and I think it's fair to say I wasn't remotely prepared for what I saw. I saw the most appalling atrocities. One child that I'll never forget had burned so bad you could see her facial bones. We knew there was no chance of her surviving that, but there was no morphine to give her. So not only was she inevitably going to die, but she would die in agony. Some days we didn't have any surgical gloves, so we had to wash previous ones. Sometimes we had no surgical drapes. Many days we had no morphine, knowing that actually a lot of those resources were probably in depots somewhere, or maybe in lorries queuing up outside at Rafah, but could not be distributed. And this is what is so urgent about the need for a ceasefire, is that the only way that aid that's being delivered to Gaza, and we welcome every bit of aid, the only way that aid is going to get to where it's needed is if there is a ceasefire.
All right. So Israeli military activities in Gaza leading to one girl's face being burned, disfigurement, and ultimately an extremely painful death because Israel will not even let supplies, humanitarian aid, in and continues its war against civilians. It's attacks on civilian and the civilian population. It's wholly inexcusable. And you heard what the doctor said as well, that this is why a ceasefire is essential. Now, the U.S. apparently is changing its policy, allegedly, possibly on ceasefire. They did introduce, the United States government did introduce in the United Nations a ceasefire resolution. And that sounds good, right? It sounds correct. I'll play that video in just a moment, but before I do that, let me just say I billboarded it a little bit wrong here. The real headline here, Middle East crisis, again, New York Times, and this is from today. The resolution actually vetoed, the U.S. has vetoed several, by the way, ceasefire resolutions, including, I believe, those strongly supported by Russia, China, and India. But this latest resolution by the U.S. was vetoed by Russia and China, and it was also opposed by Algeria, an Arab country. So you say, well, what's going on here? Maybe the U.S. isn't really the bad guy. Maybe the U.S. isn't the one that's running cover for Israel. Because here, a resolution, as the New York Times presents it, is being stymied by Russia and China. Well, the reason they said no is for the very reason that the U.S. ambassador gave what I guess many will view as an impassioned speech designed to demonstrate our morality. I think it does just the opposite. Let's play the response of the U.S. UN ambassador to the veto by Security Council permanents Russia and China to the U.S. ceasefire resolution for Gaza.
Now, let's start in New York, where the UN Security Council has voted against a US draft resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza linked to the release of hostages. Russia and China were amongst 3 countries that vetoed the US resolution. It was the first time the US had supported calls for an immediate ceasefire in the region, having previously used its own veto to block such demands at the UN. Well, this is how the US ambassador to the UN responded to China and Russia's veto.
Russia and China still could not bring itself to condemn Hamas's terrorist attacks on October 7th. Can we?
So right there, she leads with Israel is the victim, right? Not a child who's burned, who's right now, and this is, and I'm, again, there were 1,000 or so civilian victims in Israel, and they suffered greatly. But the suffering right now is in Gaza as a direct result of Israeli activities. And what is the again, there's no proportionality. Over 30,000 dead Gazans, about 900 Israeli civilians killed, and then several hundred military personnel in Israel killed. Now, again, horrible, awful. Israel, though, is the occupier. Israel, though, is the persecutor. Israel is the oppressor. But where does our ambassador go as a result of the veto? The victims are Israel. How come you can't condemn Hamas? That's all she can go to. Not there are 30,000 plus dead Palestinians as a result of Israeli activities. And why is that? Because the U.S. is supporting those activities. That's why she can't say it. That's why the focus by the United States in their ceasefire resolution, unlike in the Russia-China proposals, is on the hostages must be released first. There's no, we don't stop the killing now, this killing that's going on right now. That's not what we're calling for. We're saying you got to release the hostages. You want to see, and of course, it's meaningless. It's purely performative what the United States is doing here. It's designed to try to persuade really undecided voters, or voters, the uncommitted voters here, the voters who are saying we cannot support a Genocide Joe. Not that they're going to vote for Trump, who's even worse, but we can support Genocide Joe. And of course, the administration is very, very afraid this could cost him the election. Not that this is going to be so terrible for the American public. It's just that their comfortable, powerful positions, their, sinecures are in danger. So we've got to send a message that we support a ceasefire. Although in reality, the U.S. doesn't support any ceasefire at all. If it did, it wouldn't link a ceasefire, which means you just put down your guns, you stop firing with the release of the hostages has to occur at the same point. Because then Israel says, Hamas says, well, we can't give up the hostages if then we lose all leverage to Israel. Israel's got to release what about the Israeli? Israel's holding hostages. Israel's keeping innocent Palestinians in jail on trumped up charges. What about them? How come they're not being released? How come that's not part of the U.S. ceasefire resolution? So we present a resolution so Joe Biden can say, I'm really trying to help. I'm really trying to stop the killing, knowing full well that that resolution has no shot.
Just pause on that for a moment. Russia and China refuses to condemn Hamas for burning people alive.
And I don't understand. This is supposed to be, I thought, a ceasefire in Gaza. And yet, where's the ambassador going? Russia, China won't condemn Hamas. Well, it's not apples and apples, okay? First of all, yes, the Hamas terrorist attack was the trigger, the catalyst. But what catalyzed the Hamas attack? Decades of occupation by Israel, right? And no one says, well, the way Israel, maybe some people do. Most people aren't saying, well, because Israel is occupying the West Bank and because it's creating more and more colonies there and displacing Palestinians, because Israel is keeping Gazans in an open air concentration camp, therefore it was okay for Hamas to attack on October 7th. I mean, some people are saying that, and I would argue that when you're an oppressed minority, or in this case, perhaps an oppressed majority, when you're the oppressed, when you're the victims, it's kind of arrogant and condescending for comfortable, privileged people to say, well, you can rebel, you can make clear your displeasure at the way you're being abused and mistreated and oppressed and killed and kept in poverty. You can do all that, but you can only do it in certain prescribed ways. That's an awful privileged way of looking at the world, right? Well, we can say to the slaves, sure, you can go to the master and, tip your cap and say you're sorry that you have to bring this to their attention, but you don't like the fact that you have to work every day with a half day off on Sunday. And if the master doesn't like it, well, you just say, oh, well, we tried our best. And if you lead a slave revolt, well, that's too far. You went too far. I'm not saying it's quite the same. It's not exactly the same. And what Hamas did, I think, was wrong, and I don't think they should have done it. But again, what's okay with you? What are the appropriate ways? If you're gonna say, well, China and Russia have to condemn Hamas first, what was Hamas supposed to do? What would have been okay, in your opinion, Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, for Hamas to do? And then she's going to repeat some lies and half truths here.
Down innocent civilians at a concert for raping women and girls.
All right, so the raping women, of course, that's where they lead. And why? We already heard that from Brianna Joy Gray, because when the word rape triggers people, they're like, oh my God, they're rapists. It's not even just the killing, it's the raping. We've got to do something about it. Well, those have not been confirmed. We've been through this over and over. All the United Nations finally was able to say was, well, there are reasonable grounds to conclude that rapes may have occurred. Reasonable grounds, not even clear and convincing evidence, certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt. But she goes there. U.S. is not serious. The Biden administration has no commitment whatsoever to imposing on Israel a ceasefire, even though we're the ones responsible for supplying the weaponry that's led to over 30,000 dead now. including that poor girl you heard described in the first video.
For taking hundreds of people hostage. This was the deadliest single attack on Jews since the Holocaust.
All right, so I'm going to stop it there. But Holocaust invoked, right? Holocaust invoked. And she, that's where, rapes of girls, women, even though they're not confirmed, they're not conclusive whatsoever evidence, there's eyewitness testimony, much of it has been discredited. But that's where she goes. And then she talks about the Holocaust, right? Oh, this is an attack on Jews. More Jews killed in one day. What about all the Palestinians? Again, you don't hear it. This was her opening. Now, it goes on a lot longer. I'm not going to play all of it. I didn't, frankly, listen to it. I'm sure there's going to be talk about our concerns, our sympathies for the Palestinians as well. But, again, where does the United States make clear its sympathies lie? With Israel, the oppressor, the persecuting state. We've got Maury on the line. Maury, just give me one sec. I want to just point out one other comment before we get to you on, because we're going to talk about, I presume, corporatization of the Biden administration and, fossil fuel industry and what it's doing to our planet, and specifically states, West Virginia. But what Thomas Greenfield said, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, was this October 7th was the most deadly day for Jews since the Holocaust. She invokes the specter of the Holocaust. She talks about it. Jews are the victims, not Israelis, not the occupying nation. That's not who victims are in this case. It's the Jews. And Haaretz, I pointed this out early in the week. That's what it's a free-for-all for covering the week's week's topics. Haaretz points out that when Glazer, the director of Zone of Interest, which is about Auschwitz, when he called out Israel and its atrocities in Gaza, he was, slammed by 1,200 Jewish creatives in Hollywood who said you're invoking the whole memory of the Holocaust completely wrongly. Israel gets to defend itself. Israel has to defend itself against Hamas to prevent another Holocaust. Not that because of the Holocaust we have to all join together to prevent future atrocities. Not in the least. So Haaretz is saying no. It's the director who was correct. The Holocaust is being used wrongly by those who defend Israel, who raise its specter. And in fact, the attack by Hamas wasn't even anti-Semitic. That it's not right to call it anti-Semitic, even though that's exactly what the U.S. ambassador did. And this is an Israeli newspaper. It's the title Haaretz. Is Israel. It's Hebrew. And what Haaretz said is that the victims of Hamas weren't just Jews, right? The massacre was of Israeli people in Israel, not just Jews. So it's wrong. It was wrong. It's dishonest to claim that to use October 7th or to claim that October 7th is somehow an action that's consistent with derives from the Nazi Holocaust. It's just not true. According to Haaretz, Hamas did not spare non-Jews. Muslims as well as Thai nationals and other foreigners were kidnapped and killed as well. The U.S. gets it completely wrong, but to a purpose. The Biden administration is terrified of offending wealthy Jewish Democratic donors and is also, I think, afraid of Bibi. So they'll go just as far as they can, which is to say, well, we'll call for a ceasefire as long as Hamas releases the hostages, and our focus is going to be on how bad Hamas is, knowing full well that ain't going to fly. Everyone sees through it. They hope you don't see through it. All right, let's get right to Maury. Maury, thank you for your patience. I got you on now. How you doing, sir?
Well, it's been a busy day back in D.C. I'm I was down here in the, I'm actually in the Russell cafeteria, and when I came in here, it was very quiet. And suddenly, everybody's eating lunch, so you may hear some background noise.
Why are you there? Why are you here now? I shouldn't say there because I guess I can say here since I'm about 10 miles away. Why are you here?
There's been some really horrible things since the dirty deal was put in the Physical Responsibility Act. There's been some really horrible things happening across West Virginia, while MVP has been building this pipeline. And they suddenly decided this fall that they was no longer going to treat my farm as an organic property, and I've had to make a bunch of filings with FERC and trying to stop this because they abuse landowners. So I come up to try to meet with some FERC people, Federal Energy Regulatory Commissioners people. We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments. Somebody yelled in the background.
Yeah, no, you're good,
man.
We hear you fine. You sound good, Maury. You're good. Go ahead.
Well, we've had hundreds and hundreds of comments of people from across the country supporting me and my efforts to have FERC be accountable to landowners. And actually briefly got a chance to speak to a couple of commissioners yesterday. Just briefly, they're going to look into some stuff. I'm also on Capitol Hill this morning to let some of the key senators in Virginia, I don't worry about West Virginia because they're already sold out to the fossil fuel industry, but there's some senators in Virginia and others know what's really happening on the ground. And also to talk about Senator Joe Manchin says he's got a permitting reform almost in the bag. So we got to oppose any kind of permitting reform, even if it is for green energy, that takes away landowners' rights or weakens environmental law. And I'm sure he's going to try to do that. And I'm sure he's going to try to attach to some must-pass, like he did last year on the dirty deal. Also here to support my friends in the Gulf Coast who are fighting the LNG permitting. So next week I'm going to spend a couple of days in a meeting with the PHMSA Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration as they hold a gas pipeline safety advisory committee meeting in Crystal City, Virginia. And I'm going to spend a couple of days there to let them know that landowners are watching and give voice to landowners' concerns. So I'm got a full week ahead of me. And I always like to check in with you.
It's tremendous. Let me cut you off there for a sec. Maury, I'll get right back to you. It's tremendous what you do. You just, I don't want to say you shame me because you don't, but what you're doing is so much more important and more valuable. I go on, do my live stream from my house. I'm comfortable. You get so out of your comfort zone and you've been doing this for a while. I thank you for that. This is one of the really bad things that Joe Biden did, and he had no need. There was no reason where he just simply approved that Mountain Valley Pipeline, part of that dirty deal. And you can see, I put on the screen, you can't see it, I don't think, unless you got your phone. I don't know what you're watching. Lengths of pipe waiting to be laid. This is from Reuters. Just less than a year ago when this all went down, Maury. It's just so wrong on so many different levels, from the local, from the micro level, at the right on the ground, to the animals and the people like yourselves who live there, to the across Virginia and West Virginia where the pipeline is being laid, to the ports where the gas is going to be frozen and sent overseas, to the entire planet, which is being right now consumed in a holocaust because we continue to be dependent on this toxin.
Yeah, we got to change. I mean, we needed to change a long time ago, but what has happened with this particular pipeline, where they actually had to take away citizens' rights to complain and challenge the permits. Now, that'll be heard by the Supreme Court probably, but who knows when. There is in our instance, justice is very slow. It may end up in the courts another year or two. I'm sorry if the noise, I don't know if you hear the noise, but
no, you're fine,
anyway,
man. It's not bad. The system's pretty good at keeping it just what you're saying. You're good, and it's fine.
So, yeah, and the American people need to keep an eye on permitting. We can't sacrifice the environment, even if it's a green energy. The permitting process that we have has worked very well for 50 years in making sure that unnecessary projects like the Mountain Valley Pipeline is not built. Maybe it's built in a different way or a different place. But when industry has such a massive out on oversized control on legislators like Manchin and Schumer and others, especially in the Republican Party, when they can basically buy whatever they want to buy, citizens need to revolt. And I'm just one of those citizens that try to do what I can to change.
Is there anything you can recommend listeners right now, viewers do, or that I do, that might help a little bit? Talking to the Virginia senators is good. I understand Tim Kaine has been responsive, right? He has expressed the same concerns that you express.
Just came from his office. The Virginia senators, we need to pressure the Virginia senators. Support Cory Booker and Merkley and Markley and from other states. Voice to your own senators, even if it may be falling on deaf ears, that we don't want a permitting reform bill that takes away landowners' rights or weakens the environmental laws. Because landowners' rights... I
don't even think it should just be landowners. I think anyone who residents, but understand the way the law narrows everyone. And of course, you don't want to take anything away, but frankly, it just again reflects how unfair society is. That if you're a resident in the district, but you don't own your property, you can't complain. You don't have standing, which is ridiculous. Of course, you should have standing.
If you have to live by the side of one of these things, or travel by one, or work by one of these industrial facilities, you need to have a voice. The people in the Gulf Coast, the people in the Kanawha and Ohio valleys of West Virginia, and so many places in this country have been sacrificed. And I guess they think it's okay that people die of cancer or other horrible diseases. I'm actually working on another issue in West Virginia in the southern coal fields where the folks in Wyoming and McDowell County, West Virginia, have had their water contaminated by the local coal industry. And we raised about $10,000 to buy water for those folks, but that's just a drop in the bucket of water. That's just a Band-Aid. So nobody has heard. This has been on for a year, and nobody really has heard about it until a few people, local people, teamed up with some of the local people like the West Virginia Rivers Coalition and Appalachian Voices, and we started elevating what's going on. And now they're trying to take notice. It shouldn't take a year for people to have to go without water anywhere in this country. So
yeah. I mean, when you see that picture, and I'm just kind of blowing it up on my screen now, that pipe, just the denuded area, the trees all cut down, all the dirt, the habitat for wildlife is obviously, just ripped apart. They can't migrate now. The animals can't migrate across, their paths. It's so awful.
Forest fragmentation is a serious issue, and it was unnecessary. There are two fish that probably will go extinct because of all the sediments that this pipeline is putting in their very limited territory. There are so many things, and we see things and we don't understand it. I just heard a report that last year was the warmest year, probably the last 12,000 years. This year is already warmer. On the way up here, I traveled to Northern Virginia and was witnessing some pretty horrible brush fires. Up around Luray, Virginia, Page County, Warren County. On Wednesday was some really bad with the winds. They were evacuating towns. This is going to happen more and more frequently. And as a forester friend of mine who's passed away, he said nobody will take notice until Washington, D.C. burns. And it's getting awfully close.
I don't even think then, at least maybe some of the lawmakers will, but the billionaire class will shrug their shoulders and, sip their Chardonnay and say, this is the cost of doing business, the cost that everyone else has to bear for us to get even richer.
It's called It's called an externality. The external costs paid by citizens in elevated health costs, elevated just general costs for the storms, insurance, and we're paying it. The industry doesn't have to pay for that. We do.
So before I let you go, just real quick politically, and then I want to get your final take, but I'm going to just show, you can't see this, but I'll tell you, I was reading, I get a subscription from this guy. His name is Matt Stoller. He writes about tech issues, and he's very good and all about how the tech industry is so all powerful and the need to rein them in. And it's true. He's right. I mean, there's no question. I'm 100% with him. But he does give Joe Biden credit because Biden's Justice Department is bringing suits against now Google, Apple, Microsoft, and I guess Facebook maybe is the fourth one. I'm not certain about that one. But there are 4 lawsuits. And he says, and I'm going to just show this up here. I'll read it to you. Yesterday, Joe Biden filed the admin's 4th antitrust suit against a $1 trillion firm. But please go on pretending Biden is wholly owned by corporate interests. And my response was, no one says he's wholly owned. We're just saying he's mostly owned. And then I linked to that article about the MVP, Mountain Valley Pipeline. So my question is it enough to vote, and we've talked about this before, to vote for somebody who's not wholly owned because the other guy probably is a little bit more wholly owned. Although even there, sometimes Trump does things that corporations don't seem to like so much.
Well, you know, we have a very difficult decision, and I just think that if our former president is reelected, that we're going down a path that we may never recover from. I wish we had someone else besides Joe Biden running, but he's the Democratic. And again, we'll have to say what is in the best interest of the overall country, even though he may have done things that we don't like. So especially the people in Virginia, who's a swing state, they have some real serious self-reflection to do, and I'll just leave it at that. Everybody has to decide for themselves. I'm sure we'll talk about this when we get closer to the general election.
That's really good reflections. I mean, you're where I am too. I mean, I'm like, there's no good options, right? There's no good choices right now. I mean, you could say Jill Stein, but she's not going to win.
Has no chance of winning.
No chance.
He may be a better option. But you know, and the way it's set up, she has no chance. And so anyway, there's a lot of things going to happen between now and November the 7th, I guess. So let's see when we get later what's going on.
Hey, Maury, thanks so much for all you do, and I appreciate you're also taking time out to call here. Thank you for that as well.
I try to occasionally because I value your friendship and all the stuff you've done for us, and I hope you get that 500 likes.
I know,
really
man.
Need that.
Yeah,
more people need to hear.
But you've helped me before, so yeah. It's tough. I think the hosts who get more. First of all, they've been on for longer, mostly, but also you have to reach a huge. Only a small percentage of those who watch these videos subscribe, and I honestly I'm still trying to figure it out because I think I'm really good. I'll be biased on myself. I think I'm really good. I think I'm getting feedback from you though. I messed that up. Sorry, folks, if you heard feedback when I was talking to Maury. I didn't see that slider going up. You shouldn't have heard the feedback, but me, you would have heard feedback when I'm talking to him. Final word from you, Maury.
Thanks a lot. People need to be very aware and stay tuned to this permitting. I know I was just in the Capitol. I know there's a vote today on the appropriations. I know there was a small protest over in Schumer's office. I could hear it as I walked through the Russell Senate building. So there's a lot happening, and people need to start being aware. Thanks, Hal, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, and thank you, Maury. And I will clear up, by the way, I'll clear up the audio when I do some post-production editing, post-show editing, which I can do. So I should be able to get that, feedback out of there. That's the hope anyway. Still learning here. All right, I don't know if I got this story out there. We're talking about Israel. I want to go just a little bit longer. I also want to play for you a clip we got from I got from one of my viewers, an email really, where he took issue with my view on the claim that the vandalism of Effie's restaurant there in New York was not anti-Semitic, it's not fairly characterized as anti-Semitic. It's wrong, it's a crime, yes, but it's not fairly characterized as anti-Semitic. He seems to disagree with me, so we'll play that. But I'm not sure if I showed this, but I just also wanted to talk a little bit about how what Israel is doing goes beyond simply anyone you could possibly argue is complicit with Hamas. And I had this conversation yesterday. I was at one of my current watering holes. The old people from the old radio station days probably remember I used to talk sometimes that I would hang out at Peter B's. Peter B's still there. I sometimes check out their website. They're still around in the Portola Plaza Hotel. Always loved hanging out there. That was a lot of fun. So I found a new place. It's kind of like it. It's a chain, unlike Peter B's. I don't love chains, but it's pretty nice, rock bottom. And I think there's some in California, so you may be familiar with it. Anyway, they brew their own beers just like Peter B's did, and I like it. I like hanging out there. So I'm talking to some people there, and this guy, we're talking about the Maryland race and how Larry Hogan, the former Republican governor in this very Democratic state, actually leads both of the Democrats running for U.S. Senate, also Brooks and Trone. And so this guy said, Hogan's way too liberal for me. And he was like a real hard right, kind of a Trump kind of guy. And, I always try to find areas where I can agree with people. And I said, I'm really to the left, but I think in some ways maybe Trump gets a little bit of a bad rap, and I think he's right on Ukraine. We shouldn't be there. And the guy agreed. He's like, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't be in Ukraine. And then I said, nor should we be in Israel. And he got all angry and started saying, Israel's just defending itself, and, they were attacked and they need to protect themselves and this and that, which is exactly what Trump says. So I responded by saying, look, those people that Israel's killing, those are innocent, but almost all innocent. They're not Hamas fighters. They're children and women. So he said they're support Hamas. They're guilty. At least 80% of them are guilty. And and they deserve, Israel can do whatever it wants. So he said, these are human beings we're talking about. And his response was, and I said, and if we can't agree on that, if we can't acknowledge the basic humanity of these victims of Israel's attacks, I guess we can't really have a conversation about it. And I wasn't trying to be a dick about it. I was just like, I can't talk to you if if you don't view them as human beings who have, their own rights. And he said, well, I guess we can't talk about it. And we did. We moved on. But, this article, so if you want to say, well, they're all Muslims and they all hate Israel and they want to kill every Jew, which, by the way, if that's their feelings, I get it. I understand why they would feel that way. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, and Israel's brought this hatred on itself without question. But how would you respond to those who say, what about the Ukrainian community in Gaza? 5 months into the war, there's nothing almost left of Gaza's substantial Ukrainian community. They're not Muslim. Many of them came because they have spouses in Palestine. Some of the husbands and wives of the Ukrainians may be Muslim, but Ukraine is not a Muslim state or Muslim, former Soviet republic the way Uzbekistan is. Ukraine is mostly Ukrainian Orthodox Christians. Some Jews, those who weren't massacred by the Nazis, most were, very few survived, though most of those who survived did emigrate to Israel. And, maybe a tiny fraction of the Ukrainian population is Muslim? I doubt very many. It's mostly Ukrainian, Orthodox, maybe some Catholics. And so they had a substantial community in Gaza. And it's all gone. And what is the women? One said, the brave Israeli army is taking its frustration out on our children. There's no way you can, you want to say the Muslims, the Palestinians in Gaza are somehow complicit in what Hamas did? It's absurd in its face, but okay. That they're so guilty they deserve to be massacred. What about those Ukrainians? You going to make the same argument about them? It's okay for the brave Israeli army to take its frustration out on the children there. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's simply not okay. All right. So one of my viewers, writers, whatever, supporters, whatever term you want to use, took issue when I called out those insisting that the attack at Effie's restaurant on the Upper West Side of New York, when I called them out and said, you can't just say it's anti-Semitic. It just doesn't fly. Free Gaza is not an anti-Semitic message, and it cannot be fairly so construed. Some people will say it. They'll say, well, when you say that for free Gaza, what you're saying is Gaza isn't free. So you're saying it's the Jews in Israel who are keeping Gaza from being free. My answer is that's exactly what I'm saying. But it doesn't mean I'm anti-Semitic. It's just the reality. It's just a fact. And so credit to Haaretz for saying anti-Israel, not anti-Semitic. Jerry Nadler says it's anti-Semitism. He's wrong. It isn't. And he's wrong to a purpose, because being wrong means you can distract from what Israel's doing and say, oh, they're anti-Semitic, they hate Jews, they want to kill Jews, so therefore it's okay for us to kill them first. It's a terrible argument, but it does seem to persuade some people. So one of my frequent viewers, and I so appreciate them for being, following what I do. I'm always touched that anyone watches, anyone listens. I really appreciate it, even if they get really angry and disagree. And I also appreciate taking the time to write. So this critic wrote, where should we draw the line and acknowledge hate speech and incitement for what they truly represent? Well, my answer would be, when it's hate speech and incitement, then we say that's what it is. What classification should we assign to a scenario where a hangman's noose is discovered hanging over a tree in the yard of a black man? So I have already discussed this. I think a hangman's noose is hate speech. I think it's racist. I don't see that there's a lot of real dispute there. And I've even brought this up. I remember I did a show about how here in Montgomery County, Maryland, some nooses were found in black people's yards. That's hate speech. That's racism. That's a hate act, right? Hate crime. I really think, I don't see any other. Clearly it invokes specters of a lynching where black people, mostly men, some women, every now and then a non-black person, maybe a Jew, Italians. There were lynch mobs in New Orleans, I believe in the 1890s, against Sicilian or Italian immigrants. There's the case of Leo Frank. He was a factory owner or mill owner. Maybe it was, I don't know, the factory mill, whatever term you want to use. And in, I believe, Atlanta, who was accused of molesting a girl who worked in his factory. And he was railroaded. I'm not sure if he was actually lynched, but there was certainly a lynch mob there for him. But the great majority, probably 99% of the victims of lynch mobs were African American, and they were murdered, right? And so often by being hanged. So hangman's noose is a hate crime. It's targeting a person because of their race. And it's targeting a member of a group that is a traditionally marginalized group, people who have been treated as badly as anyone's been treated. You know, certainly in the past, and we still have a long way to go to address the poverty, the pathologies that disproportionately impact on the African American communities in this country. So that's not an issue for me. And I don't think it's, I'm not saying, I don't quite understand why the writer brought up the hangman's noose, because I don't think it's analogous to Free Palestine. Can we dismiss it as not being targeted hate speech simply because there was no explicit racial slurs left behind? Well, I would say no, we can't. But I would also say that the hangman's noose is a racial slur. It's not even coded. It's what it is we're going to hang you. So I don't think it's the same. I do not see it as the same as this. I just don't. I even don't see it the same. You can't quite see on the right side of that. You can't quite read it, but there's also black. There's also black spray paint that says "line up here for genocide," to support genocide, I believe. Let me see if I can get that a little bigger for you. Yeah, I think if you look over on the right side, it's in black. It says, for genocide, line up here, or line up here to support genocide, if you can read it in the far right. I'll see if I can even blow that up a little more. That's bad, right? And the blood on the storefront, which you can also see, it's bad. I'm not supporting. It's not okay. That's not okay. But I don't make the assumption, and I don't think we should assume, that non-race targeted, non-racially explicit messages are as hate speech. And especially because there's clearly an alternative explanation. The alternative explanation is this guy's Israeli, and Israel is perpetrating a genocide right now. So that's the answer. Now, I have a problem. You shouldn't conflate all Israelis. They shouldn't all be put in the same boat. Many Israelis are against what Israel is doing. I don't know where Effie stands. I'm not aware of Effie having given fundraisers for Israel the way other Israeli restaurateurs have. So I don't know. But I think you better be sure of your target. And even then, it's wrong. Even then, vandalism is wrong. So I did respond to my correspondent, and I just want to show you that real quick because it's kind of what I said before. I don't think the noose is nearly the same, and clearly it is racist. And then I added, one way I distinguish is whether a group is dominant, right? I mean, I think it's, you get more of a pass if you're a member of the oppressed or persecuted group, or you're standing up for victims of oppression or persecution. To me, then you get a little more leeway than if you're part of the oppressor group. And I'm not saying all whites are oppressors, certainly not. But yes, the oppressors of African Americans in this country anyway are white, almost all of them. So if you're a white person putting a noose in a black person's yard, that is really, really awful. Even if you're poor, even if you're working class, you're still part of that dominant group. And I wouldn't call you privileged, but you're still kicking down. That's worse, in my opinion, than if you're an African American and you're reacting to white people. It doesn't make it okay. Like you see sometimes white kids getting targeted by blacks. That's bad. That's bullying. That's harassment. That's not okay. But this kind of explicit race-based targeting by white against a black is, to my way of thinking, is a lot worse. It's worse. Anyway, it's worse. So I noted one way to distinguish is whether a group is dominant. Jews are rich and powerful. Israel, not all Jews, but as a group, Israel is crushing Gaza under its heel. In contrast, African Americans have less wealth and power than other groups here, are more likely to be victims of racism than victimizers. So, I mean, that's that's where I go with this. And I think that's kind of what hate speech is, kind of considered, although Jewish people are considered, likely targets. And if we are, I want to know about it. I want to see it. But I presented cases where I think it is. But I don't think Effie's restaurant is one of them. So just a little bit on tech. I showed this before. This tweet, Matt Stoller sent a real nice, where he presented, and I do recommend, even though I sort of disagree with this, I disagree with the framing here. He did a real nice piece on Substack. I actually invited him to come on this show. I don't know if he'll have any interest. I don't know if he'll look at my numbers and say it's not worth his time. Maybe, I don't know. But he does a real nice piece talking about why it's really important to go after these tech behemoths and how their monopolistic practices are so harmful. They're bad, really bad for the environment. You can't, for example, you can't swap out your battery in your laptop in a lot of cases because they're glued in, they're soldered in. You can't swap out in almost every case the battery in your iPhone, in your phone, whether it's an iPhone, smartphone, whatever you want to call it. You can't do it. And that is so wasteful. It means you got to throw out your phone after 2-3 years because the battery, or at least that's what the tech people want you to do. I've taken my phone when my batteries have gone slow. I actually take it over to iFixit. But I was watching the process for removing the back of your smartphone. I don't use Apple products, by the way. It's incredibly involved. I'm not going to do it, and I'm kind of good with tech, I guess. I think. I mean, I've replaced the CPU in my ThinkPad T520, which is a 13-year-old laptop, and it still works great. It's heavy, but it works great. And I'm not going to replace it until it stops, until it dies, because the next unit won't last as long. It won't be nearly as repairable. And unless I buy another ThinkPad, I won't have that little, track point, the little red button in the middle, which I love. So, the computers today are designed, whether they're handheld computers like your smartphone or the laptop, they're designed to be disposable. And that's awful for the environment. It's just, Apple will pink wash and green wash everything it does, but its actual policies are devastating for the environment. So Matt Stoller pointing this out, and not just when it comes to the environment, but also just how much extra wealth and income the tech bros and the tech companies take out of our pockets that to which they have access because of their monopolies, because they don't compete on price, because they're not aggressively competing to make the best products that are most serviceable for consumers, that are most user friendly. So their capture of the national income, of the gross domestic product, is so much greater than it really should be if there was real competition. Now, I'm not saying the entire tech industry wouldn't be as big as it is now, but the individual firms, specifically Apple, but Google, Facebook, and Microsoft really just capture far greater share of the national income and wealth than they should, and a higher percent, and it's terrible for the economy. It's terrible for us. It stifles innovation. It means fewer people can get into the tech industry. It also means that businesses have less available to pay workers. Because if you have those Microsoft subscriptions, they cost you a ton of money. You have less available to, pay your workers a little more, to provide better benefits. You have to charge higher prices for your product. So all of that is terrible for the economy. And Matt Stoller makes those really good points. And I agree. I'm glad Biden's going after the tech industry. I don't believe Trump would do that. But again, let's not overstate it, right? Biden's also supported the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Biden has only gone as far as we force him to go. When it comes, related when it came to Israel, right? That ceasefire call is he's taking the babyest step he can take, and hoping that it will placate his critics, not actually modify Israel's behavior. Or if he thinks it's going to modify Israel's behavior, he's delusional. Israel's made it very, very clear that only direct threat of aid being withheld by the United States is going to do anything to stop them. And that's a bridge that Joe Biden will not cross. And from Axios, and you can see 7 hours ago, so today, they're saying, yeah, those tech suits that Stoller is extolling, those antitrust suits are good, but then they're not going to do much. Now, I don't know if it's true. I hope that's wrong. I don't think they shouldn't go after. I'm glad, again, Biden's going after the big tech. But again, let's not overrate or overstate what Biden's doing as some sort of tremendous, sea change. This is finally the president we've been looking for to take on corporate hegemony. It's just not. That's what Paul Krugman would have you believe. Finally, we have a president who cares about workers. Just not true. Just not true. The administration only has gone as far as we forced it to go, and that hasn't been very far at all. So why are they bringing the suit? First, let's get there, and we'll get to the limitations. Attorney General for, I guess he's there in the antitrust division. We bring this case to make sure Apple competes by innovating rather than imposing rules and fees that prevent others from innovating and competing too. So that's good. I agree. Yes. Yes, and of course, Apple's done everything possible, limits access to its app store. It's almost impossible to switch phones, right? If you're in the Apple walled garden, you can't get your information. It's not on your phone where you could then hook it. And by the way, I've tried to do this with my wife's phone, who she does use an iPhone. It's almost impossible to get anything on the phone or off the phone onto like a hard drive, right? So I wanted to get some, transfer some CDs onto her iPhone so she could listen to music from some of my old CDs. It's really easy to do on my Pixel, my Google Pixel phone. It was really easy to do with my Galaxy. I just connected a cable from my laptop where I had ripped the CD, WAV files. So the CD has 13 songs on it, and each song is a different file. So I rip it. There's easy software. I use Linux. It's all open source, totally free. Totally legal. I own the CD. I can take the contents of the CD and put them on my computer. There's nothing, I'm not violating any rights because I own that CD. I ripped I'm not selling it, right? I couldn't sell the songs, but I can certainly share them with my wife. We're in the same family. So not doing anything wrong. I ripped the CDs, the songs, and on my regular phone, on my Google Pixel, and if I had my old Galaxy, I could do the same thing. I just connect a USB cable from my laptop to my phone, and I drag and drop the files over. And I can play them on my car, what have you, when I connect my phone to my car stereo. I can do that. There is no way to do that with Apple. You couldn't do it. I tried to connect the cable. I could connect a cable. I had an Apple USB cable, a FireWire, whatever they call it. It's not FireWire, some other, maybe it is FireWire. I'm not sure. I couldn't do it. It wouldn't let me transfer them, or I could even transfer. I guess I could get the files on there, but the Apple Music Player wouldn't play it because it had to be specially encoded. So Apple makes it virtually impossible for you to take any data from your phone and put it on another device or vice versa, which means you can't really easily, cheaply, quickly change your operating system, your hardware. You just have to keep going back to Apple because they store everything in the cloud anyway. It's all connected via the cloud, their cloud that they own. So you don't own anything. They own it all. And it's terribly anti-competitive, and they totally overprice for everything. You can't. You buy an Apple laptop. You want more memory than they're going to give you in their base configuration. They charge you like $200 for, I don't know, like 8 gigs of memory, which should cost you 50. And if you could just put it in yourself, it'd cost nothing. That's one of the things, again, I really like about my ThinkPad. I've upgraded the memory. I've got 16 gigs of memory in there. That's plenty of memory. It's enough. It's what I need. Unfortunately, I can't go any higher because of the limitation on the motherboard. But I just bought the sticks and stuck them in myself. No problem. Easy peasy. Can't do that with Apple. I saw a guy trying to do that online who's like a tech expert. And I guess he could do it. He had to get like a heating pad and a blower. And he soldered. He had a soldering iron. Man, soldering is hard. I've tried to. I can't do it. Maybe some people can. I don't have that skill. That's what the tech companies, these monopolies, use their wealth and power and their staff for. Not to make a better product, not to make a product that's easier for you to use, but to make it harder for anyone to get into the business, to compete with them. So that's exactly why there should be an antitrust action against them. Unfortunately, we see that it may not have the effect that we want. And, I'm not detracting from Biden. What I'm saying is, this isn't in the past, recent antitrust actions haven't been sufficient. You really have to, what I always say, everyone has enough, no one has too much. Raise the hell out of top marginal taxes. These company executives, these managers, do what they do because it makes them richer and richer and richer. They have stock options. If the stock goes up, the company's profits go up. They get bonuses. Their divisions perform well. They get bonuses. So that's why they do it. But if you started taxing them at 95% top marginal rate above the first $1 million, well, it's not going to make them that much richer. They're not going to get that much more than they would have gotten otherwise. So their incentives would dry up to a great degree. Also, the companies, their corporations' ability to buy huge law firms to do their bidding would also be reduced. And here's what Axios says. So the lawsuits aren't stopping tech from gobbling up AI companies. That's really where the next, apparently that's the next field. I don't really understand all that stuff, but that's where the Justice Department is saying we really don't want AI completely dominated by these tech behemoths. And yet, look, Microsoft just bought a huge high-profile or a very high-profile AI company. So whatever they're doing so far, not saying it won't have a good effect, it hasn't yet had that impact that we're hoping. So yeah, they bought AI, and Apple is also purchasing this AI model, Google's Gemini AI model. Companies are colluding. They're colluding with each other. They're continuing to consolidate in the industry. It appears, at least, that the not just the threat, but the reality of the Justice Department's suits have not had the desired impact. What would? And so Axios, this was a good article, by the way, and a lot of times Axios, I remember Ed Schultz said, hey, Axios is center right? Let's face it. And he was right. He was correct. But sometimes the center right does a nice job, I think, on antitrust issues. This was also brought home by Louis Rossman. If you ever see Rossman's videos, like I don't like to promote other, competition, whatever, he's great. He really is. And he talks about how the Wall Street Journal did a really good expose of Apple's just absolutely despicable repair business practices. So sometimes the more conservative outlets will actually do a real good job exposing corporate malfeasance. And Axios, we're just about done, by the way. I'll be wrapping up in a moment. But the real on Halitics, don't forget, please click like, please click subscribe. Real danger to tech's dominant firms would be a structural remedy. Rulings that require companies to substantially change how they do business or to sell or split up. That's what I want to see. I want to see these companies broken up. I want to see Amazon. I want to see all of them. You can do business maybe in the United States, but you can't do business overseas, right? You can be a warehouse, but you can be a wholesaler, but you can't be a retailer. That kind of thing. Just break them up, man. That's the solution. But as far as I know, that's not being discussed. That's not being. Also, by the way, if you're a shareholder, you should welcome. People say, "Oh my God, I own my Microsoft stock. What happens if they break it up?" Heck, you'd probably be better off saying you got to sell your Surface. They make those computers. The server, you got to sell your service. You can't be a retailer and a wholesaler. You can't sell directly Microsoft. You either sell to computer manufacturers or you sell to the general public. You can't do both. You can't have all these various licensing requirements. Tell that to Microsoft. You can't be in the business of making an operating system and your word processor, which is Word, or I guess they sell, or Open, whatever, 360, Microsoft 360, whatever they call it. Tell them that. You know what? If you own stock in Microsoft, you'd be better off. Because if you broke it up, you'd get a little share of each of those subsidiaries that are now individual companies. In the end, they'd be worth more money. AT&T stockholders back in 1982 are better off now because they broke the company up into all these other companies that are super profitable, including AT&T, which is very profitable, still around. Same with Standard Oil. You own Standard Oil in 1890, 1900, whenever the Sherman Antitrust Act went into effect, and they broke it up into Chevron and, well, I guess whatever Standard Oil. There's a million of them. Exxon, Mobil. Amoco, Chevron, Sohio, Socony Vacuum, which became Mobil, right? So when Standard Oil was broken up, people who own shares in Standard Oil got all those shares of those other subsidiary companies. Sure, none of them were worth what one share of Standard Oil is worth, but over time, because they had to compete with each other, some of them failed, some of them do as well, others did very well. In the end, shareholders were actually better off. We're all better off. Well, we're not better off because it was fossil fuel company industry that's destroying our planet, but the individual shareholders are better off most of the time when these companies are broken up. The only people who aren't better off are the CEOs because they can't demand as much money because they are not, and the top managers because they're not running as big a company. There's a lot of CEOs running smaller companies. And even that's better than having one CEO running a monster company. So that's the real solution, is to break these companies up. And actually, that was ordered in 2000, but it was reversed. I don't know if that's something that the Biden administration has in plans. It would be nice. It would be right. It would be good. I'm glad they're doing this. I don't want to diminish it whatsoever. What I'm saying is maybe we don't hold out too great hopes. Maybe this isn't really something that the tech industry fears to the degree we want them to be in fear. And until we have a president, someone like a trust buster, like a Teddy Roosevelt, someone like an FDR, someone like an LBJ, who really is bold, things are going to get worse. We're not going to be able to respond to the crises that we face, which are probably more serious than ever in American history. All right, that's going to do it for today. That's going to do it for March. I'll be back on April 1st, Monday. Look forward to talking to you then, and have a great weekend and next week as well.